Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Opportunities for Sustainability in Live Music Events. My name is John Fernandez. I'm the director of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Environmental Solutions Initiative, and we're thrilled to have you with us. We have a fantastic panel here coming from a variety of places in the music industry, and this is all about live music events. It's about sustainability, so it's also obviously about climate change. I'm going to be the moderator for the session throughout. We have about an hour's worth of conversation, but before we get to that, we'll have a couple of presentations from both the MIT side and then from the Anjunabeats side. I'm also going to be asking questions that are pre-prepared, but we're also very interested in questions from the audience. So we're looking forward to what you have to ask. I will now begin with the introductions of our panel, and I will just be doing them all myself, just to get that out of the way and to get us into the conversation. So to begin with, Anna Johnson is Sustainability Environment Officer at Involved Group, the parent company of Anjunabeats and Anjunadeep, Involved Publishing and Involved Management. Anna leads on embedding sustainability across business operations. She coordinates Involved Group's partnership with MIT, facilitating messaging and educational opportunities and offering opportunities for people to engage in real climate action. Welcome, Anna. We also have Chiara Badiali is music lead at Julie's Bicycle, a not-for-profit mobilizing the creative community to take action on the climate and ecological crisis. Chiara joined JB in 2012 and since then has contributed to publications like the Show Must Go On report on UK music, festival environmental impacts, worked on projects including the Europe-wide EE Music, energy efficiency and live music, helped design the International Julie's Bicycle Creative Climate Leadership Professional Development Program, and worked on consultancy projects with companies including Live Nation and Royal Albert Hall. She is part of the Music Declares Emergency Working Group, Vision 2025 Outdoor Events Climate Action Steering Group, and is an advisor to the Impala Sustainability Task Force and Live Green. Welcome, Chiara. We also have Rob Van Wegen, is a test expert at Innofest, a company that uses festivals as an innovation lab to test prototypes with a positive impact, and sustainability supervisor at Eurosonic Nordislag, ESNS, is a not-profit, European artist-only, 100% showcase festival and music conference. Rob is also working on a roadmap canvas to help festivals create a plan for their vision, ambitions, and goals regarding sustainability. Welcome, Rob. Stefan Gevaert is a student research assistant at Deep Transitions Futures, Utrecht University. By day, he uncovers connections between sustainability transitions and futures thinking to help ESG investors create a better strategy for transformation. By night, he loves playing the piano and being part of the Anjuna family on the dance floor. He recently completed his Master of Science in Sustainable Business and Innovation by investigating how foresight enables business models to embody more transformative sustainability. Welcome, Stefan. And Michelle Lee is the founder of Clever Carbon. She launched her career in Silicon Valley, where she worked for some of the biggest names in tech, including Salesforce and DocuSign. A proponent for making sustainability the new norm, Michelle founded Clever Carbon to help teach people about carbon footprint in a hip, fun, and relatable way. She believes a carbon literate society is one where transparency and accountability will flourish and one worth striving for. Welcome, Michelle. And finally, Tomas is a DJ, music producer, and songwriter with several releases on major labels, including Anjunabeats, Sony Music, and Armada Music, to name a few. With 10 years experience, the Argentinian DJ has performed at the biggest venues and festivals around the world, from ultra music to a state of trance. So with those introductions now, I'm going to turn it over to Norhan Magdi Bayomi. Now, Norhan is a signed artist with the Involved Group, and she's also a postdoc in the Environmental Solutions Initiative having received her PhD in the Department of Architecture Building Technology program last year. She's an expert in urban extreme heat and the use of AI in the built environment. So Norhan, please, you have the floor.
Great, great to be here with everyone. So I'm gonna share my screen quickly. So today I'll be talking about our collaboration with Involved Group in one particular event, which was the ABGT 450 Weekender that happened in London last year. So the main idea that we wanted to do this pilot just to understand what are the carbon emission associated with audience travel to different live events. And that was one of the most interesting events that took place specifically in the UK. So of many of you who attended that event, if you remember, there were some people asking you, where did you come from? And if you're a crew member or audience member, and are you attending the two events? So we were trying to gather all these information to build an insights on what modes of transportation most of the audience took that day and for the entire course of the event, and also capturing that information to get an estimate of how much carbon emission were associated by just going to that specific event. So what we did is we carried out two surveys, one before the actual event happened, where 162 participants recorded their answers about what modes of transportation that they took to the event. And then we estimated how much carbon emission were associated from that specific survey to translate this into around 4.3 tons of carbon. And just to give a magnitude, that is equivalent to consuming electricity in 3 households in the Netherlands, or flying 11 economy flight between Amsterdam and Rome. And you would need to plant around 65 and 357 trees just to be able to offset that much of the carbon. But what was interesting that 50% of the participants took the train to that event, so that's good. So we would have like minimum flights, international flights. But we repeated the same exercise after the event took place, just to understand how many people changed their mode of transportation after the event happened, so like change in plans. And then we identified that from that 160 survey, there were around 9.5 tons of carbon that were emitted just going to the event for the 2 days. And that's equivalent to consuming electricity in 9 households in the Netherlands. And you would need to plant between 135 to almost 800 trees to offset that much of a carbon. So what we did afterwards, we tried to expand on that survey sample just to get a magnitude of the total audience for the event, for the 2 days of the event, the 450 event. And that accumulated to 1,352 tons. So that seems like a big number, but actually that seems reasonable to the number of people who attended that event that day. And we're trying to understand how this could be related to what specific strategy or carbon offset that could happen, specifically by engaging the audience. So if we shifted that transportation mode to different behavior change, like taking carpooling, for example, we could reduce that amount by 120 tons of carbon, which is a huge shift in reduction. Or even like switching from bus to bikes, if people like living in approximate distance, they can just bike to the venue, or even going further by using hybrid vehicles, like taking electric cars or hybrid cars to the event. That would have the bigger impact to 230 tons. So that kind of very initial exercise was just to understand the magnitude of an event like this happening, taking place in the UK, and having most of the audience traveling within Europe, what kind of carbon emission that we could estimate from this commuting behavior, and where are the opportunities to engage. So that was kind of the main motivation behind doing this pilot. I'll stop my talk here, and I will shift back to John.
Great, thank you so much, Norhan. So we wanted to highlight this work at the beginning of this event, because this is exactly the kind of example of the collaboration between Anjunabeats, the Involved Group, and MIT. This particular combination of a music industry heavyweight and a world-class technical research university. This is the kind of combination that's going to be required to move forward on the very, very challenging priorities that we have for meaningful actions to address climate change. So we wanted to highlight that project. Another kind of work that we are doing through the Environmental Solutions Initiative, which is relatively new for MIT to be engaged in, is communications and public engagement on climate change. And I'm going to now introduce Laur Hesse Fischer, who leads the development and execution of public engagement on climate change for the ESI. She focuses on cross-partisan collaborations, as well as bridging the divide between the public and scientists on tricky climate issues. She also hosts ESI's podcast on climate change, TIL Climate, Today I Learned Climate, and she manages communications on climate generally across the Institute. So Laur, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, John. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to talk a little bit about what we're doing at MIT. MIT has a commitment to share its knowledge with the world about what we know about climate change. And as John mentioned, I lead a lot of that work at ESI. So to quickly share my screen, that's showing up okay?
Yep.
Great. So there are three things in particular I want to share with you that we have as resources that you all can use for yourself, but also can help you better talk about climate change with people in your lives. So we have our prime content is climate.mit.edu, what we call the portal. Here we explain tricky climate change topics like carbon pricing and capturing carbon dioxide from the air. We also answer people's questions about climate change. So if you email us a question, we'll talk to a researcher or a faculty member at MIT and get it answered for you and write it up in language you can actually understand and put it on the climate portal. And we've been featured in the different news outlets and media outlets that you've seen there. If you want to dive a little bit deeper and really try to understand the science behind climate change in a more sophisticated way, we have the Climate Primer, which is an interactive website where you can learn about climate science, risks, and solutions. And then, as John already mentioned, we run a podcast, 10 to 15-minute episodes about different climate change topics, again, demystifying it for people who are interested in climate change, but maybe not enough that they want to read a book or take a whole course or really invest themselves, just want to kind of get a basic understanding of what's going on in these different issues. That's what TIL Climate does. And I'm proud that we were recognized by the New York Times as one of the top climate change podcasts out there, as well as we won an AVA Digital Award. Well, one of the things I wanted to just share is that it's become really obvious over the years of doing this and in my work in climate communications, and as part of the strategy that we employ, is meeting people where they are. But this can be hard to do when talking about climate change, because how do you know where people are? How do they know what they know about climate change, or what kinds of lens they're looking through when they're thinking about and considering climate change impacts and solutions? So even though we're very different and we're coming from different backgrounds and different belief systems and different political stances and everything else, there is something that most of us have in common, and that's a desire to be part of something that's larger than ourselves. Climate change and the issues that surround climate change are certainly larger than each of us individually. And something that really inspires me in this conversation is that I think we can all agree that music festivals excel at this. They excel at making us feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. In fact, I have this pin that I got from a music festival. Says we're all in this together. And I love wearing this because it's completely how I feel. I mean, when we're at a festival, it creates community, a sense of belonging. It stirs up our emotions. It pulses blood through our veins. I mean, these events can really change us. And we can use that quality of music events to motivate people's sense of belonging and also their agency around climate change. So just to kind of put a couple of seeds out there for the conversation that's about to come, one of the approaches that we really take in our climate communications at MIT is we really try to step beyond talking about what an individual can do to reduce their own emissions. And we focus on the systems that have things be the way that they are, and then how to change that, how to affect those systems. In other words, it's less about what I can do about climate change than it is about what I can leverage or what I can inspire. And so in this conversation, it's going to be great because you're talking about how you walk the talk in reducing emissions. But then also you're demonstrating to all the people who are attending these events that this is a real problem. It needs to be taken seriously. Solutions are possible and they're happening right now. And then I would say the next step is dual. One is to invite people into the solutions that you're creating, like what Norhan was talking about, but then also how they can inspire and leverage their own change locally and be a part of this larger movement. So I'm excited for the conversation you're about to have today, and thank you for allowing me to join.
Great, thank you so much, Laur. That was fantastic. So Laur has really hit on the essential motivation behind this collaboration with Anjunabeats and with others in the music industry, and that is that MIT and other universities have a lot to learn from people in the music industry about how to engage and how to motivate and how to bring the science to large groups of people who are predisposed, interested in climate change and predisposed, interested to act in a meaningful way. So that's really the essential motivation behind why we're together in this, and hopefully we'll be doing a lot more together in the coming months and years. So wonderful. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Norhan. So now to get to the questions, to a discussion with this fantastic panel. And I'm just going to start us off. We have a few questions ready to go. I'm going to address particular panelists with particular questions, but please go ahead and riff on your answers and take the conversation where you feel it needs to go. So the first question is kind of the obvious one, and that is, what role can the music industry play in climate actions? What role can music event stakeholder groups, including organizers, suppliers, contractors, the artists themselves, but then also, as Laura was just referring to, the music fans, what role do they play to reduce the impact of those live events? We know that live events consume energy, materials, water. And so how do we move forward in a responsible, low carbon, biodiverse, positive way when we run live music events? And I'd love to hear your thoughts. To begin with, Anna Johnson of the Involved Group, please, if you could offer your thoughts, and then moving then to Rob once you're done. Please, Anna.
Thanks so much, John, and thanks for everyone who's tuning in this evening. I think it's a testament to everybody's desire to see change and to want to take action. So really appreciate all those attending this evening, showing up. I think personally we're living in quite a challenging context wherein it's quite easy to feel overwhelmed and sometimes apathetic about the challenges in front of us. But at the same time, you know, we do know that individual actions can make a difference. And what's more, it's when those individual actions are aggregated that there's a kind of collective response and we can see bigger change at scale. When we think about events, particularly, all the different stakeholder groups are in many ways interconnected. And the way I like to envisage how we can change and make the most of events and find opportunities for sustainability in those environments is to see each other as kind of compassionately critical friends. You know, how can we facilitate sustainable behaviors between the different stakeholder groups? We all have within us a degree of agency. We can make decisions, and we can also be quite outspoken. So I think there's opportunities for people to express, you know, what they see as opportunities in the event space, and to lean into each other's kind of respective capabilities to see those changes through as well. Rob, what do you think?
Yes, thank you, Anna. Well, firstly, I agree, and I'm already inspired with the things I've heard, and I'm focusing myself not to nod all the time, like saying yes and yes. But what we also like to do with Eurosonic Noorderslag, we would like to have a very pragmatic approach and to try to go beyond our own festival, because of course we like to reduce our impact but we do believe that we can do so much more. So we started off a program which is called Innofest, and we tend to try to use our festival or the festivals we work with together as a small testing ground, because we are a flexible, temporary mini society. We create our own small villages, and we have the possibility to work together with our stakeholders, with the municipality, to try and go beyond that and try new innovations to see how they work in this, testing mini society, and see if they can become part of the solution in the future. So we're not only reducing the things we're doing right now, but only try to see what we can do later on. And I also loved the story about the everybody in it together. And I think that it's always a very good moment with so many people combined. You can tell your story and you can push, because the time of inspiration is over. We were so in the moment of activate people to do something. So we can set the example by lowering the threshold and make it the options as easy as possible for our visitors to make the right choice, and to influence them to make that choice not only now, but make it easier so they could do it together at home as well in the rest of the rest of the moments they're making this choice.
Rob, I just loved what you just said about, the time for inspiration is over. It's now time for action. Of course, inspiration needs to continue, but I think that's exactly the right kind of perspective that we need, an action-oriented set of ways of being. And I believe that Julie's bicycle, this is really very much part of what you've been doing, essentially mobilizing the arts and culture to take action on climate and the ecological crisis. Chiara, could you tell us with some specifics, the kinds of things that you think work really well in this general conversation?
Yeah, I think, again, a lot of what Anna and Rob have said really speak to the way that we work. Julie's bicycle was born out of the Live Earth concerts in some ways nearly 15 years ago, because it felt really uncomfortable to send artists out on stage to wag their fingers at people about climate change if the industry wasn't also transforming its own business models from the inside out and sort of taking action to make sure that whatever we were doing was aligning with kind of the policies and the targets and everything else that were out there as well. So it's kind of, speaking to what Laura was talking about we have to change the system, we have to change the framework also within which we bring people together and within which we inspire people. So I think before anything else, where we try to get people to is really making that commitment. I think we've seen some great and inspiring stories of how people are taking action, but as a whole ecosystem, I think the live music industry is not quite there yet in terms of really recognizing that moment of climate crisis that we're in and putting those environmental considerations sort of on a level with the artistic and financial considerations, but actually considering where we are, that is absolutely where we have to be. And everything else is going to flow from that, whether it's, the planning in terms of routing, in terms of venue selection, in terms of how we run our venues and events and invest in renewable energy and energy efficiency, and sort of use those carrots and sticks to get people involved in those for shifting behavior in those high impact areas, like what we eat or how we travel. And so I guess everything that we do is trying to bring people together around specific issues, really get our heads around the problem. So one example might be generators at live events. So we did some research 10 years ago where we measured generator loads and saw that how many of them were oversized. And you bring people together, the suppliers, the event organizers, everyone else, look at the problem, figure out, ways to take action, start looking at what emerging technologies there are as well, start looking at the skills that we need and sort of push that forward. And I think all we can do at the moment is keep doing that over and over and over again.
That's great. Thank you, Chiara. I'm going to go off script here because I think there's an interesting segue about targets and goals. Anna, Chiara, Rob, and anyone else, very interested in this question about a zero carbon or a net zero carbon target for live music events. Is that a realistic thing? Is that possible to do? And when is that possible to do? Is that like next year or in 20 years? Any thoughts on that from anyone?
I mean, I'm happy to take that. I think, as with anything, it sort of depends when you start out. So are we looking at venues? With venues, we have a net zero pathway in certain ways. We have to get them powered by renewable energy. In part, that depends on the electricity grid that they're linked to, shift to plant-based diets, and put pressure on public transport systems. With festivals and events, we're starting to have, things like battery technologies and everything else, where actually there is a net zero pathway in terms of getting off those awful diesel generators that we have to get rid of. I think when we, look at different units like a music tour, I think that's a lot more difficult in terms of that net zero pathway. We don't have a net zero pathway really for aviation. And so that's where we have to start looking at, do we shift the business models? Do we say, okay, so I think, it depends a bit on which parts of the industry you look at.
Yeah, so the part of your answer is it depends on what system boundary you're drawing, and we can certainly do it for live during the event on the property itself for a live music event. That sounds possible to do, but beyond that, there are some major challenges. Anna, did you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I kind of echoing what Chiara has to say. There's not a sort of silver bullet solution for any parts of the industry at the moment. We are so interwoven with different stakeholders across our value chain. That is anyone from the people who manufacture our recorded products or soft merchandise items through to the suppliers that bring infrastructure to our events. It's a journey that everybody's on at this moment in time, and ultimately we need to support each other, but what we can do to enable the quicker shifts really depends on who's most motivated and who can work together really collaboratively. That's my thoughts. Rob, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that.
Yeah. What I do believe is that we all need to work in this together, because every festival has its own setup. So I think we all need to innovate at our own part to see and learn from each other, and that's why we as a festival also had a push towards the European government saying, you need to push us more with legislation. You need to motivate us because we have some front runners doing stuff, but we need everybody to get involved. So we're like, you're like a school student asking the teacher to be more tough on you, which is a very weird situation. But there are so many possibilities to make a change and to do it collaboratively as well. But it also takes strength and guts to go out there and make the statement and be transparent, but also vulnerable, as saying, we find this important as an organization. That's why we take these steps and measurements. We want to take you with us, but there's always this part about the stress and stretch. How much can you stretch the people to collaborate with you, and don't stress them too much into things they don't look at. It's always have to be by steps, but that's why we need everybody, so we can get this whole infrastructure set up in a proper way, and it feels so much more normal for everybody to be included in this.
Yeah, please, Tomas, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Coldplay World Tour that they just announced for 2022. It's all about like promoting sustainability into this industry, which is awesome, and it's a great point of start in order to use it in other festivals. They are promoting like the use of new technologies, like for example kinetic field, where by people dancing you can like generate electricity, and also the use of batteries to power the stage. And I was like reading the other day, I love construction, and I always like to dig about that. And there are companies in Europe that they are like doing CLT wood engineered, which is awesome because it's even better than steel and concrete. And you can like build stages out of this wood. And they're made in sustainable managed forest, which is a great thing. It's not something like they're like deprivating an entire forest and no one is like taking care of that. They're like actually doing it for the environment because, as you guys know, the woods, the trees, they absorb most of the CO2 emissions. So I think that's also like a great idea to apply nowadays with the technology we currently have in order to reduce the carbon footprint in festivals.
Yeah, the very good points, and echoed in the chat as well. This idea of investing in on-site infrastructure so that the generators aren't required. So essentially, what we're talking about are relatively small smart grids with renewable energy supply with battery storage. You know, it's not a new thing. The suite of technologies can be put together. One thing that I wanted to note, I think, Chiara, you said it, and it's absolutely the case that some venues are compromised by the electric grid within which they sit, right? So, you know, the fuel mix, and the example that I give is if you buy an electric car and you drive it in New England, the United States, well, you're going to get the carbon benefits from that electric car because some significant amount of the energy, the fuel mix of the electric grid is green. If you drove that electric car in Missouri, you're plugging into a fuel mix of 80% coal still. So it really, really matters the context in which you're plugging in. But this idea of developing a system by which festivals can plug in and derive zero carbon energies is really doable. I actually want to shift the conversation just a bit because we've referenced the attendees, the audience, the music lovers, and I'd love to go to Michelle. I was taken by the phrase or the sentence that stated that you teach people, your group teaches people about the carbon footprint in a hip, fun, and relatable way. And that's been brought up again and again, that this has got to be you kind of have to co-design awareness around climate. You can't just sort of instruct people. Very interested in knowing, how do you think music lovers, what's the way in which to inspire and enable music lovers to take action on a sustainability agenda?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that question. So, I think at the heart of the challenge that we're facing is we don't yet have an objective way to communicate our impact and understand our impact. So today, when we talk about a single-use coffee cup or a flight in the context of climate, people will say, oh, it's bad, right? That's literally the way that we talk about climate today. But what if instead we used data and facts? So what if instead I told you that a single-use coffee cup during the manufacturing process emits around 16 grams of CO2, whereas a flight that's around an hour and 15 minutes emits around 121 kilograms of CO2. And just so that everyone knows, I actually don't have enough space on this slide to put enough carbon dioxide molecules, it would just be a sea of pink. But what's important to understand is that we need to be objective as opposed to subjective, and we need to understand our impact. And when this data is available to us, we can all make better decisions. And it's not only the music fans, the artists, but it's the people who own the venues, our suppliers. When we all understand our impact, we can make better decisions. We can innovate. We can think of things that don't even exist today because people have this information. And I think what's really important is at the end of the day, what gets measured gets changed. So, the data that Norhan shared and, some of what Laura was talking about is, does really resonate with me as well, because we need to all kind of have a baseline. And the work that we do at Clever Carbon is we teach people about carbon footprint and about impact. And, once people understand, oh, a potato is on average 40 grams of CO2, a serving of pork is 1,800 grams, and a serving of beef is 17,700. Chiara was just mentioning, more plant-based diets at these festivals, people can start to understand why that is important. And, today, if you ask most people, what's your carbon footprint? Most people don't know that they have a carbon footprint. And most people don't know that, depending where you come from and where you live, your carbon footprint is really different. So for example, in the UK, the average carbon footprint is 8.3 tons. In Vietnam, it's 2.1 tons. And in the US, it's 17.5 tons. And so you'll see like the European countries, they're usually around, 7, 8, around the 10 range. Canada, United States are a little bit higher. But, having this information, understanding you have your carbon footprint, I think is a good place for everyone in the industry to start, because then we can start quantifying the impact and the change. And so one of the things we do at Clever Carbon is we have a 2-minute carbon footprint quiz. Everyone can take it. It essentially has 6 questions that kind of just touch on the largest impacts in everyone's lives. So it's, the commuting, flying, your diet, your energy at home. And so once everyone kind of has this baseline, we can start to understand, okay, well, if I want to improve my carbon footprint, because I don't want to assume that everyone does, these are the things that you can do. These are your areas of opportunity. So I encourage everyone, whether it's our quiz or another quiz, go find out your carbon footprint. And then we can start to see more things like this, right? So this is a coffee menu that instead of the calories or the price, it has the carbon footprint of each item. And I would love to, see at a music festival, this type of information, like when you order this drink, or, if you brought your own cup, what can we have a day where I can bring my own cup to a festival and, get a beer? I think that would be so amazing, because at the end of the day, it's not only carbon footprint, it's your water footprint and your waste footprint as well. And, if we think of things like single-use items that are often consumed in, music events, actually the carbon footprint of plastic is not that high, right? The carbon footprint of a paper cup actually isn't that high, but the water footprint, the waste footprint, and the downstream effects are, have their own type of impact on the planet as well. So I think setting the baseline, laying the foundation, everyone can then innovate and do better.
That's great, Michelle. Actually, it's this tracks so closely to what we found, Anna, in one of our early surveys that we did together, that the Anjuna family was really predisposed, really interested in taking meaningful action, but they actually didn't really know how meaningful, how much of a carbon reduction they would get from making one decision over another. I think this is a very common thing. In other words, there's a real interest to do this, but as a rational being, I will want to know that the action that I'm taking actually has an impact. And if I have 2 or 3 options, I'll want to know which one has the greatest impact. So this kind of sharing information, making it visual, communications is extremely important. This is just syncs with what we have found so far in audiences of live music events. I'd actually like to ask Stefan this sort of same set of issues around the question of how can the music lover, how can the attendee to a live event participate. I'm interested to know, because as your introduction said, you're on that dance floor every once in a while. And so how do you feel there could be, or is already, the interest, and what could be the actions that you think that participants at live events could take with the artists, with the venue management and others?
Yeah, I think knowing where to start is always hard. And so I really appreciate the work that people like Michelle are doing on that. I think in the way I think about Anjuna and my music experience, it's often about things that I can't measure though. Like I can't really measure how much the experience of an Anjuna festival means to me, or how much fun I had that night, and how much the connections mean to me. And I think that there's something really powerful in that. I know that the other people on this panel know a lot better than me how to kind of scientifically change this industry, but I also think that there's a lot of power to be had in the Anjuna family. And I don't know, I think every little thing that gets done in that family, every good that you do just gets amplified. And it's important to be aware of that, because a lot of times I'm afraid to put something out there. And when I do, I just see other people picking it up. I see nothing but good come from it. And so reaching out to people like the ones running the labels or the artists that you care about these things can be a really big step, because after all, we're the heart of this industry, what keeps it dancing and running alongside everyone behind the scenes. And if they know that we care, then they'll be twice as motivated. So I think when Anjuna puts on events like these, or when any other artist shows that they care, supporting them is one big thing. And I think as a family, we're really good at supporting each other. And apart from that, I think, signing petitions like those by Music Declares Emergency also shows that there's a larger body of people who care. And just daring to speak about the things that you do. I remember just having a casual conversation with a friend about just that sustainability was important to me. And this happened to be the friend who glitters us all up at the festivals. And I didn't think twice about it, but apparently the conversation stuck, because next time that we talked, she talked about how she was really looking for like biodegradable glitter, and how she knew it was important to me. And I didn't really think that people would care, and it came back like that. So I'm just imagining, if we talk about bigger things, about wanting to support our local scene more and making it, this vibrant thing that we don't even need to travel for example, what an impact we could have if we could get together as a community. And there's so many good values in the music community and in Anjuna in particular. So channeling that power and making connections with other people who also care, who are out there, even if you haven't met them yet, that's the non-measurable side, let's say, in my opinion.
Stefan, that's fantastic. I just love your glitter example. It connects directly to this really serious issue of microplastic pollution, and the idea that from a conversation you would have a person who's really invested in using glitter seeking an alternative. That's a really, really important point, because that goes back to what Anna said before, which I completely agree with, is there is no single silver bullet. This is going to be 1,000 silver bullets addressing 1,000 different issues. I hadn't even thought about glitter, but that's a really important one, because that microplastics, for example, at the gorge, that's a really beautiful natural environment. You would really not want to have, that glitter really extend itself and disperse in that ecology. So I just love that example. So Rob, please, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, what I would like to add to the story of Stefan is that what we found out when we were using our festival as a testing place, connecting with the audience, that an audience it's coming to a festival open-minded. They're there to experience new things. They're curious. They're to reach out to new artists. So they have their vision wide open. So they're always so eager to learn and to know more about what we're doing and becoming aware of the possibilities that are there, as long as we don't enforce them is we need them to do, but we need to be explanatory. We need to reach out to them and start the conversation and give them the room to this is why we do it. This is how we do it. And in the beginning, we had this chance oh, do they really want to? But they were just coming up to us without even doing anything, but because they're just so curious when they're at a festival. It's you want to be amazed, you want to be the right mindset is already there with the music lover at a festival, I believe.
That's great. I actually want to cycle back to Michelle. There are a couple of questions that have come from the audience about an individual's participation in these kinds of initiatives. In other words, I'm listening to this, I really want to contribute, I want to learn more, but what do I actually do? How do you even begin? I'm sure you've asked yourself that question. Maybe you do things in that regard. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this can seem like a very daunting journey, but actually it's very simple. And I think especially when you take the quiz and you understand where your carbon footprint is, in the results page, you'll get a bit of a scorecard and you can see where your areas of opportunities are. So for example, when it comes to commuting, are you walking, taking public transportation? Are you driving into work? So, where possible, maybe work from home a little bit more if that's an option for you, or consider taking public transportation a little bit more. For myself, I used to live in San Francisco, and we have this culture of taking Ubers everywhere. The public transportation was meh, so it was cheap because San Francisco is really small. And when I moved to London, I lived there for 1.5 years. If I want to get from East London to West London, that would be like $100 Uber ride. So I quickly learned that, it's better for me to take public transportation, but also, that is a lower carbon footprint for myself. So the 6 places in the quiz, commuting, flying, your diet, your consumption and your home energy. Those are all places where you can make small improvements. And even, something like, for example, for myself, at night, I turn off my monitor. So it's not being an energy vampire. I charge my phone in the morning as opposed to overnight. And so there's many, many small things. And once you get yourself into it, you start following content on Instagram if you use social media, and next thing you know, everything in your feed is ideas and tips on how to do better. So I think all those points are really important, and it might seem daunting at first, but there's a lot of support, a lot of resources out there.
That's great. So Norhan, you have your hand up, and I actually want to emphasize that Norhan really bridges these two communities because you're a signed artist with the involved group. So please.
So I just wanted to reflect based on the collaboration we have been having, and also from my own personal experience. We had this discussion with Anna earlier that audience wants to make a change, but they're just looking for an incentive. Like, for example, if there were a system that would give them an incentive, you change this transportation mode of behavior from going by your car to do a carpooling, you get a discount on their ticket expenses, for example. So would love to see more of this happening in real life, because yes, people want to make a change, but if there is no incentive, to push that behavior forward, nothing will change, I think. And I think we need these kind of initiatives because people, they understand that there's personal impact, but they just want to know how they could start. And there's guided incentives that are being placed on the venue side, on when you buy the ticket, if you bring your own cup, because I've seen people in the chat talking about bringing their own cups to the festival. These are the kind of things that would really drive the change.
Thank you, Norhan. There is an equity question in there as well, because you don't want to leave the actions to just those who can afford to change the usual way they do things, whether it's traveling, the usual way they travel to a festival, or otherwise. And so, providing incentives so that everyone can participate is an important thing. So Chiara, yes, please. We can't hear you. You're muted.
There we go. Sorry, I just put my hand down instead of unmuting myself. But I think that touches on something really important, which again is kind of as venues and festivals, we're in the middle between that big system and also that individual change. And we shape some of the choices that are available to everyone that comes through our doors. And I think that's really important with audience travel. We did a piece of work with Festival Republic and as sort of other festival promoters about 10 years ago, doing some initial surveying of what types of carrots and what types of sticks might work to help shift people's travel behaviors to particularly greenfield festivals. And you kind of need both. You need both the carrots and the sticks. And actually you can close that cycle. So if you increase the car parking charges for everyone who is not carpooling, then that gives you a budget to either put on more coaches that are coming from other places or to pay for those incentives that you might want to give people who are arriving by public transport. Or it gives you a budget again to experiment with other things, whether that's, you know, guided bicycle rides or anything else. So I'm really excited at the moment. We're about to do another piece of work to revisit some of that work together with some specialists in climate communication and social science as well here in the UK, and hopefully pull together some new guidance around that again. And then, yeah, I'm also always really excited when venues and festivals kind of step forward into the political side of things. So one of my favorite examples of climate action was earlier this year, the chief executive of the Royal Albert Hall, which is kind of one of the most iconic venues in London. He stepped forward and he wrote an open letter to the local authority who were going to rip out a bicycle lane that they put in during the pandemic. And he said, as the chief executive of the Royal Albert Hall, can we please keep it for our staff and for our audiences? And I think as an industry, we need to get braver and more courageous to step forward and get involved in sort of these conversations as well that are happening immediately around us.
That's great. That's great, Chiara. There's really interesting conversation that, or thread of this conversation that has to do with the contribution of the individual, the audience, the attendees, and then the system itself. So the system that's already in place at the venue, at the live venue. Conradis has an interesting point, which I very much agree with. You know, many of the points that we're talking about are aimed at changing behavior of the people attending. I think it's good to acknowledge that the people that are attending are generally the younger demographic, generally therefore a little bit more interested in climate change and having a positive role. And that idea that that their behavior is the problematic part of things, I think is a message that is not the right message, actually. I think the message is really, you guys are change makers. You could be change makers. And so to your work, Michelle, and to climate communications generally, is really up to our responsibility, both, you know, on the MIT side, what information is really necessary to, you know, to forefront. And then of course, at the live venue, to see in real time artists, the venue management in real time taking steps towards a low carbon future is incredibly inspiring. And so I think we are talking about, I think it's not a good conversation for us to be thinking that, well, you know, the audience is the one that needs to pay the price. That's absolutely not the case. It's really this more collaborative kind of situation that we've been describing. Michelle, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is interesting is when the public and private sectors come together. So for example, New York has set goals. They want to be net zero by 2040, carbon neutral by 2050. So what does this mean for a music festival that will be operating in New York, you know, in 2040? You know, these types of policies are important. And, you know, at the same time, I think, again, it's just really important for everyone to have a baseline of the information. And I'm going to share my screen here one more time, because I think this is, you know, when we talk about being bold, Chiara, you know, this information needs to get out there. So for example, in terms of CO2 concentrations in our atmosphere currently, we're at 418 parts per million. That's just an expression of concentration. Back in 1900s, we used to be at 296, so that's on the right-hand side. But today, we're at 418, and we need to be at 350, according to experts, in order to, maintain a stable climate. So when we talk about the carrot and the stick, right? You brush your teeth because when you don't, you go to the dentist and it's painful, right? So you don't really need a carrot to kind of motivate you to have that behavior. And some of this data serves as that same purpose, like understanding maybe what happens if we don't make changes. And, just thinking even one step beyond that is, when we are focused on, okay, what are some of the solutions? We kind of need to understand the scale. And, there's a lot of talk around tree planting, offsetting, and doing all these things. But, these are facts. 30% of our planet is land, 70% of our planet is oceans, and our oceans are natural carbon sinks. And when they're healthy, which currently they're not, they can actually absorb much more carbon. And we've got 70% of that. So I always like to show this data to people so that they can understand the magnitude.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Another shift in the conversation now. I'd love to hear from Tomas and also from Norhan. What is the role of the artist in this effort, and in particular, of course, at live events, but maybe even more broadly, how can artists help build a culture of sustainable behaviors among the fans? And again, what I want to emphasize is not solely the behaviors of the fans, it's also the actions that those fans can take in systemic change, whether that's political, technological, behavioral, in their communities. So Tomas, I would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts? What do you think your role is in particular at a live event, but more broadly as an artist?
I think as artists, we should encourage people that every time they come to our events, we're doing together something for the planet, with all these initiatives that all of you guys are proposing and many more that they are going around right now in the music industry and they're being discussed. I think the most important here is to use this community, like for example, the Anjuna family, and say like, hey, let's all together, let's do something for the planet while having fun, while having fun in a concert, in a festival. And I think that's the great, like the great starting point of all these things. And also as an artist, it's my responsibility to use social media to share this knowledge, to also explain to the crowd how important it is to do something for the planet now, right? Because like we talked previously, it's important, like the inspiration and like say like, hey, let's do something for the planet, but we actually need to do something now. It's like, okay, let's start working now. So I think that's the most important thing right now. Like we all together start doing something while having fun. Let's say, for example, every time you buy a ticket to come to a concert, we can plant a tree in your local town. Let's say we are doing a party here in New York. Well, every ticket sold for an Anjunabeats party in New York will be also a tree planted in the New York area. Things like that. Promote the reusable plastics. Let's say you can go with your own cup and get your drinks, and and also like promote the idea of going to commute to the venue by using public transportation, bike, or electric vehicles. So I believe we have to start now to do something for this planet.
That's great. Norhan, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I want to echo on what Tomas said, and that ties back to when we had the panel here with Tony in person. The artist power is very, very much has a direct effect on the audience. I see always like this kind of connection between the music that the artists make and how it influences people's life. And we see this with Above and Beyond music, but I see that the artist, there's a huge responsibility that the artists carry with respect to even influencing change by starting with his own personal or her own personal change. That could really inspire so many people. And that needs to be the culture for so many artists, that they really have that kind of power to influence and drive change. And that's the thing I see. There's a huge opportunity with working with artists also when we start the discussion about climate.
That's great. Michelle, you had your hand up, but it seems to be down now. No? You're good? Okay.
Yeah, it's down.
Okay. Actually, I did want to insert some thoughts here. The role of the artist is extraordinarily powerful, no question about that. In fact, that was one of the motivating thoughts behind collaborating with the involved group. Is we need scientists and artists to collaborate together, because scientists are doing the work. They know what the issues are. They can articulate the line of sight to solutions. But we need large groups of people to really buy into this and really do it with a passion and a deeply personal way. That's super important. I also want to refer in the chat. It's super important for the science to get as much airtime as thoughts about being inspired and the experience of a festival. And the science tells us that you can be net zero or zero in the operations of a live event, but if you have your attendees, your audience coming from all corners of the earth, the carbon emissions from that are just extraordinarily large, and you haven't really done anything. In fact, today, even in a diesel-powered live event, the carbon emissions from the actual event itself are tiny compared to carbon emissions from audience travel. So here's a question for you, Chiara and Anna, and anyone else who wants to. So is it better trying to take all of the responsibility off of the attendee? Is it better for artists to tour more and audiences to travel less? Is that a solution?
I mean, I can have a go at that. I think in some ways that's one of those comparing apples to pears sort of, questions that I don't think has a really good answer either way. I do think somewhere in the future, absolutely, we want to think and get involved also with broader movements around, say, urban planning, ideas of the 15-minute city. What would it look like to have proper music and cultural provision within a 15-minute walk for absolutely everyone who lives in a city? And I think we can't deny that as an industry, the music industry is hugely tied up with international tourism that is going in the wrong direction. And we are happily jumping on board with that in terms of marketing. And I think there are some difficult questions that need to be asked around that. And kind of rethinking maybe the ease with which we make certain decisions about international travel. But I also don't think that the solution, at least under the current model, can be sending artists and crews who already struggle in terms of mental health and everything else out on the road for more than they already are today. Partly that is also at the root of some of our issues. So yeah, I don't think it's one or the other, but I do think it is thinking about, what future models and relationships to audiences might look like and how we might shift those.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, I was going to agree with you on all of that, Chiara. In addition, I think there's a really awesome opportunity to reimagine what the local scene looks like. You know, it's one thing to have people jetting from one side of the globe to the other, but what if we can build relationships within local communities and really build those scenes, create new opportunities for people who were perhaps on the periphery? I think there's a lot of potential there for new scenes and for new sounds.
Great. Tomas, you did have your hand up.
Yeah, from the artist side, I think touring should be carefully planned in order to reduce air travel. And also considering the fact when you're touring, if you're going to cities that they are like in the same country or in a, probably like 200, 300 miles from each other, going by electric car or electric buses instead of like taking a plane, which obviously would cost like less time, but we're trying to do something for the planet. So 4 hours, 5 hours from one point to the other shouldn't be too bad.
And have everyone weigh in on this. Sorry, go ahead, Rob. No, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, what I think our ultimate goal is for artists as visitors, as organizers, is to make, if you want to make a decision, you have the skill in your head with all these things go in, like, you have got so many things that involve you in a choice. And one of the weights that needs to go into the skill is sustainability. And we try to make this weight as big as possible. So it's not even, you don't have to think about what's the best option. You automatically think, hey, this doesn't feel right anymore. So your internal skill is being switched by the weight of the responsibility of sustainability. And I think that can make the choices for an artist to either go touring in which way or how many times so much more easier, or think of alternative solutions, because you have this weight on you saying, I don't feel comfortable anymore with the things we are doing right now. And so, as long as we got this, sorry.
No, please go ahead. Finish, please.
Well, and if we can make this happen, then sustainability becomes part of our decision DNA. And I think that's the biggest prize we can get. And if we can get that all together, that will really move us forward into the right direction.
And the thing that I wanted to add was, it seemed this again goes back to, also the artists need information about meaningful actions to take, not just the audience. So if they can have better information, curated information, real time, given the way in which they want to be artists. So it seems to me that the ideal is that an artist would never feel constrained in their art, but they would have options. They would have ways in which they could lower their carbon emissions and reach their sustainability goals by not compromising in any way their artistic production. That seems to me.
And I believe that's a two-way street with the organizers, because as festival organizers, you need to give them solutions and provide them with the right information to make these decisions. Yeah. And the artists can push organizations saying, we want you to get your act together and we don't accept this anymore. So get moving to also close the gap between the different festival organizers.
And again, that's the role that MIT and other universities are playing, to provide information on low carbon systems, distributed energy, battery storage, and electrical storage with batteries, all of that sort of stuff, so that those solutions are readily accessible to artists. Norhan, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo on the discussion from the panelists that given that what we have been seeing or observing in the project with Involved, that having more artists reaching different geographic location seems to be more reasonable than having like 2 or 3 big events in 1 year and then having more people traveling from different locations. So it's kind of like similar to taking the music to the audience rather than just having 2 big events, and you see this kind of like big flow of people traveling from all over the world just to attend that big festival. So this is just a comment based on the observation that we have been seeing, like a pattern from the work we have been doing so far.
A quick question for whoever wants to answer. what is the role of live streaming? In other words, can live streaming help to help artists to reduce the carbon emissions if there's if significant parts of the audience decide not to travel? Is that a solution, or is that simply a complementary way of distributing their product? Yes, Chiara, please.
I think at the moment it's very much complementary. What we've seen when some really big artists have done, appearances also in online video games and everything else, is that it's actually led to an increase in physical ticket sales that's been driven by that. So I think at the moment, we're not displacing audiences. If anything, we're growing them through that. In the future, I wouldn't discount it. There may be moments, but again, I don't think we're going to get rid of live music per se. It might just mold and shift into something else. It's a very different experience that we might be creating.
Thank you. Other thoughts on that? I want to note that there is a relatively geeky conversation going on in the chat about refurbished speakers and other things. That's really great. I'm thrilled to see that happening. And that is absolutely the kind of thing that has to happen across the music industry, these kinds of insider discussions. We're in the last 9 minutes, and I would like to ask this question. Actually, yes, Stefan, please.
If we don't have much time left, I would just like to celebrate that Norhan on my right here in the Zoom, because you were talking about the power of the artists, and I think getting this collaboration started in the first place is so much credit to the power that she has leveraged in her position, and is an example, I think, to how much an artist can do to make things happen. So I mean, I don't know, I would find it inspirational if I was in an artist position. And I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that.
I could not agree with you more. Yeah, it's been it's a real inspiration for me to be working with Norhan, and for her to have started this relationship. Thank you for that, Stefan. So the last question we have that I'd like many of you, all of you, to weigh in on. It's a very simple question. What would you like to see happen in the next amount of time? Year, 2 years, 3 years? Going back to, I think Rob, you were suggesting, or maybe a couple of you said, this is about now. I think Tomas, you were also saying, this is about now, actions now. Let's keep in mind that to 2030, from 2020, we need to reduce by 50% the carbon emissions globally. And that is completely scalable. Every individual, every company, every region, every nation has to reduce by 50%. And that is an extraordinarily ambitious goal, given the fact that during the pandemic, carbon emissions were reduced by about 5.4%. So, this idea that now in 8 years, less than 8 years time, we will have reduced by 50% global carbon emissions is the challenge of human civilization. So what would you like to see happen in the next year or 2 or 3? Anyone, please, love to hear your thoughts. And it could be within what you do or music industry generally, however you want to answer that question. Any thoughts? I know I have an answer. I'll start.
I have something. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Rob, please.
Well, what I think is very important is that we're preaching for our own choir. We're in our bubble, we are in our network. And I believe that a big influence has to be, we have to step out and reach out to the networks we're not reaching out right now, to make a change over the whole line of festivals, artists, organizers, to get the movement out there in a broad vision. Because there's I love working with these front runners, but at the same time, there's so many festivals we don't know about, we have not connected yet, who haven't get involved. So I need to push myself more to step out there to the festivals where I feel like, okay, you're not really there yet. And that's why I built my roadmap canvas where we spoke a little bit before, to say like every festival who says this, okay, I want to do something, but I really don't know where to start, to lower their threshold and reach out to them and say, hey, I've got something for you, man. We're here. Please contact us. Please ask us what we can do for you to help you get moving as well. Because these first steps, that's where your biggest impact lies for festivals. They can grow so easily. And if you just start working, your impact is massive because we have these first solutions ready for you.
That's excellent. Chiara, please.
I think one thing I would love to see is more people putting their money where their mouth is. And I don't just mean that in terms of sustainability budgets. I actually mainly mean that in terms of skills and people. Because I think where we're still stuck at the moment is you get this moment where people are like, I want to do something. I don't know what to do, but I don't want to hire anyone. And I don't want to pay the existing people that I have more time so they can figure out what I need to do. And it's a real stumbling block. I think we will recognize the shift at the moment in time where people recognize that this is an area of skill, and it's an area of time and resource that we have to invest in. We have to particularly invest in people as well. And so, yeah, I think that would be the biggest shift I would love to see in the next 12 months.
Thank you, Chiara. Excellent. Michelle, please.
Yeah, I would love to really see artists receive quality education around our climate challenge, and in turn teach fans. And they, artists have this incredible platform, and it's great to see ones like Tomas here kind of sharing his thoughts around, overcoming our sustainability challenge. But, if artists are sharing, hey, this is my carbon footprint, or you should learn about your carbon footprint, or, I did this because the impact was that, we can have a much more meaningful conversation. And the audience of someone like Anjuna is really sort of prime audience, right? They are Gen Z and millennials, people who are driving the future, people who will have a lot of spending power in the future. So artists really have such an incredible platform, and it's a very cost-effective way to help scale our solutions.
Thank you, Michelle. Anna, please.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, just sort of on a further note, we've talked about how there's definitely a level of awareness about the issues and a degree of understanding. But what I'd really like to see in the next 12 months, or even sooner if possible, is how quickly we can shift that level of understanding and awareness to empowerment, agency and action. And, tools like yours, Michelle, the role that artists can play, the knowledge that's coming out from different sources across industry in the form of reports, white papers, talks like this, you name it. How can we help create a sense of agency within our own Anjuna community, but how can we then cultivate across that community the ability to then sort of break down the barriers of the echo chamber and speak to even more people. Speaking to that point, you mentioned, John, about scaling up our efforts. And I think, sorry, also on Chiara, your point about, there being more investment and people putting their, money where their mouth is. I think if people do have that better level of understanding and want to take action, then I feel like these things would join up and happen.
Thank you, Anna. Any other thoughts on the question that I asked, or concluding thoughts from this panel? We are within the last couple of minutes, and I have some thoughts, but I don't want to hear myself talk much more. So I'm interested in hearing from all of you. It's really been a wonderful discussion. Also wonderful, and albeit, Rob, to your point, between people who are really invested in this, right? And so this conversation really does need to disperse very widely. It needs to really transmit itself to those who are not particularly engaged in these issues, but who are in the music industry, either on the attendee of live music or on the artists or purely on the business side. I think that's a very, very good point. So I stalled long enough to get any final comments from all of you. Anyone else? Okay. Anna, that's an old hand that's been up, right? Okay, so very good. Well, so I am going to offer some concluding thoughts. First of all, I want to start with saying I find it just a real pleasure to spend time with people in the music industry, always. You know, it's one of the co-benefits of having launched into this work. It was not the motivation behind the work. The motivation was the thing that we've been talking about. How can we get scientists to really contribute to the challenges that you have been articulating during this session? And that's really the motivation, and also for us to engage more directly with people who, again, are already predisposed to want to take meaningful actions, but need to know more, need to understand better the situation, need to understand the value of their actions and make really informed decisions. On our side, on the MIT side, I also want to just pause and say it's been a real pleasure to work with the involved group, and we're going to continue our work. So one of you made the point that there is real extraordinary value in the vanguard, and the vanguard includes the involved group to really address these issues in a really serious and rigorous way for the benefit of the entire music industry. So I am hoping that things move very quickly, and I was very keen to hear what you thought would be the next best steps, because the next 2 or 3 years should be we should see major shifts in how things are happening all across the economy, including the music industry. There are absolutely line of sights to doing the things that you're discussing. Chiara and Conradis's technical discussion in the chat is absolutely, that's a doable thing to do. Distributed renewable energy and storage, portable renewable energy, but also efficiency. I like to say these days that the greenest energy is the energy that's not consumed. So efficiency, reducing consumption, and doing all of those things without ever compromising the experience, which is really seminal to the music industry. The idea that Laur started out painting a picture of, and several of you have talked about that transformative experience of being in a live music event. That's essential, and that's a driver for really moving towards a paradigm shift. And there should be more novel ideas. There should be more new kind of off the wall, off the charts kind of ideas. Like we talk about distributed energy, but we could also talk about distributed engagement. Maybe one way to do that is major live events should have major viewing parties, geographically distributed. We've seen that done. That could really become a really big thing where you just walk down the block and you have a major live viewing party in which you can participate if you can't go to or decide not to go to a live music event. And that should be priced into the marketplace. That should benefit artists, and that should benefit the music industry. So thank you so much for all of your good thoughts, all of your creative ideas. Please, let's continue this conversation among each other and with others, so that we can really get to the solutions that we all just see the glimmer of happening now. Again, we will be doing events like this in the future regularly, and we hope to engage others in the continuing discussion of collaborating scientists with artists in the music industry. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for participating and attending this event. And stay safe. Peace to you all. And we will see each other again sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.